Welcome back to our discussion on the political fallout of the conflict in Georgia. Joining me from New York, Nina Khrushchev from the New School. She's the granddaughter of former Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev, and also Russian expert and professor at Columbia University, Padma Desai. We're going to go straight to the phones right now. We have a caller from Colorado, Nabil from Colorado. Nabil, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, actually, thank you for taking my call. I don't have a question, but I have a comment I would like to add. I've been watching the war right now for the last days now. I think that Georgia and Russia, both, they made mistakes. Not just Georgia or just Russia, because Georgia actually started the war. So the president could have done a lot of things. You know, there's a lot of peacekeeping elements that he could have implemented in there before starting the war. Now, when Russia actually responded to the war by war, now the focus is all on Russia. So that's my comment that I would like actually to address to the media.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your call. That was Nabil from Colorado.
I think that's a very good comment. Who is at fault? I think the Georgian president did a very miscalculated move. He expected that he might get some American support. He did not visualize that the Russian reaction to what he was trying to do would be so strong, and that tanks and military planes would be flying over the country. But I think we also need to put this in a wider context. Why did this happen? And coming back to the earlier question from your person in Canada, the relevance of, for example, the missile defense units and their proposed stationing in Poland and in the Czech Republic, how is that connected with the current Georgian-Russian conflict? I think the Russian leadership under Vladimir Putin, and I think Dmitry Medvedev, the president, agrees with him, that the Cold War is being revived in some way by the placing of these missile defense units. What is the necessity of these units? And that has sort of aroused Russian ire. The other aspect which has been bothering the Russian leadership from way back is NATO's eastward expansion. When President Bill Clinton was the president, Hungary, the Czech Republic, and Poland were admitted to NATO, and in return for that, Russia was admitted to G7, and we have G8 now. So that was a quid pro quo. But over the time, NATO has expanded. The Baltic countries were added to NATO, and then whoever becomes a member of the European Union, Bulgaria, Romania, new members are almost automatically being added to NATO. And now the question came up before the Budapest summit whether Ukraine and Georgia should be admitted to NATO. And this is where the Russian leadership worries that NATO coming right to Russia's doorstep, as it were, what is the purpose of this kind of advancement of a military organization so close to Russia? And these bigger decisions on the part of the United States foreign policy makers, the Bush administration in particular, has created the current problem. I think the current Russian-Georgian conflict is a foreign policy failure on the Bush administration's part. And as I read these poor people fleeing from the military action of Russian planes, they were saying, where are the Europeans? Where are the Americans? So you arouse the hopes of people with these false promises and false hopes, and I regard this as a severe blunder of the Bush administration.
Okay, let me ask Professor Khrushchev. Professor Khrushchev, you heard there from your colleague talking about the encroachment of NATO eastwards and also the deployment of missiles in the Czech Republic and in Poland. When you look at this from Moscow, does the Russian leadership have a point there by saying, look, you know, our influence is being encroached upon, it's being compromised, and Vladimir Putin has basically said enough is enough, and this is where it's going to stop?
Absolutely, and I think that's what he's basically saying, and that is absolutely a correct point on Padma's part. And there is another thing that Putin was warning the United States about, warning the West about, is Kosovo. He was saying, well, you're granting Kosovo independence within the limits of a sovereign nation, and you think it's okay. I'm warning you, there is going to be a problem because we have Abkhazia and South Ossetia. So he promised that if they do behave in sort of not very well calculated manner and not careful manner, these things will happen. So in a sense, he's basically doing what he promised he did. And I think the miscalculation on the part of George Bush and Mikhail Saakashvili, for that matter, they didn't believe him. But Putin had no other choice but to act on his word, because he believes that under Boris Yeltsin, the West got away with a lot of things that they promised, like a NATO expansion, and then didn't deliver. So he wants to assert himself as a tough leader who cannot afford to have Russia treated as a punching bag, and that's what he believed Russia is treated. So one of the reasons that he responded with such vigor to Saakashvili's provocation was that I promised that that's what I'm going to do, so I'm going to do that. So in a sense, he feels like he's justified. But one thing I want to add to this, that the fact that somebody behaves in a horrible manner, just like I believe that Padma is completely correct in saying that there was a blunder in Bush's foreign policy, which is not a surprise, because it seems like Bush's foreign policy has been one big blunder on every single front. It doesn't still excuse a country that calls itself a civilized nation that enters the 21st century and is a Western nation, as Putin many times assured us, to behave in this ruthless, completely brutal manner with disregard for international norms.
Well, let's go to the phones. We have another caller, Steinar, calling from Norway. Steinar, go ahead with your call.
Yes, my name is Steinar. I call from Norway. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Yes. I say that the president, Mikhail Saakashvili, he invaded South Ossetia, and he is the aggressor. So my opinion is that he must be put to the court in Hague for as a war criminal. I say Saakashvili must be a war criminal.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your call. Professor Khrushchev, let me put that to you. Saakashvili, the guilty party. Do you agree with that?
Well, I actually, I think it's an interesting proposition, and in fact, that's what Saakashvili and his government is calling for Putin and Russia. So I should be very careful about the sort of abusing the international justice in this regard. But I do believe that there must be. Just one second. There must be some sort of consideration, because Russia indeed already said that they should, the South Ossetia would file a suit in international court, and the Georgian government says that Prime Minister Putin and President Medvedev in Russia should be called to justice in the criminal court. As I said before, I think they're all guilty, and they all equally deserve consideration and chastisement from the rest of the world, and really there should be sanctions. I'm not talking about economic sanctions, but certainly some diplomatic sanctions against both parties, not just presenting Saakashvili as a great Democrat in Russia or Putin and Medvedev as horrible villains, and vice versa.
All right, I'm going to give Professor Desai the last word.
May I add something here?
Well, I just want to ask you, do you believe, after what has happened over the past few days, that Georgia will ever become a member of NATO?
It's going to be very, very uncertain, because it would seem to me that Southern Ossetia and Abkhazia, both these breakaway units, they are now sort of in a position where Georgia is a country. How do you define that country? That has become very uncertain in view of this new development. Besides, it would seem to me that while we are discussing the fate of the Georgian president, Mikhail Saakashvili, it would seem to me that it's up to the Georgian people to decide. you know, as the situation settles down and as people
Professor Desai, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to break in there.
Happened.
Thank you for joining us, Professor Desai, Professor Khrushchev, thank you for joining us. On the next show, we look at the legacy of the Palestinian poet and author Mahmoud Darwish. We'll see you next time.